All right, let's jump right in. We're about to explore an absolutely incredible story of tenacity. It's about a nation that was shaped by its very geography, by fertile river deltas and a long, rugged coastline. This place has been a crossroads for thousands of years, which, invites both incredible trade and constant invasion. This is the story of Vietnam, a nation literally forged in a relentless cycle of resistance and rebirth. So this is the big question we're going to try and unpack. Think about it. How does a nation survive 1,000 years of foreign rule, go head-to-head with global superpowers, and somehow come out the other side with such a strong, unique identity? It's a story of survival against just unbelievable odds. Vietnam's identity has been hammered into shape by outside forces, yet it has never, ever broken. So how on earth did they do it?
Well, a huge part of the answer starts right here, with geography. Vietnam's long S-shaped territory with these incredibly fertile deltas has always been a prize. And that very richness, that gift, also made it a target. This map shows how for centuries they expanded southward, but that expansion was always happening with this shadow of a threat from the north. Its location was really both a blessing and a curse, a fertile cradle of civilization that was constantly under threat.
To really get this story of resistance, we have to go back, way back, to the very beginning, to the ancient roots where geography first started shaping the people who would one day call themselves Vietnamese. Okay, so picture this. Around 4,000 years ago, something crucial happens. You have these migrations from what is now southern China, bringing new people and, really importantly, new technology into the region. These groups brought with them the secret of wet rice cultivation. And that skill, well, it would not only feed the nation for millennia, but would also form the very genetic bedrock of modern Vietnam. And the result of all this movement? It was profound. Vietnam isn't some single uniform culture. It's a mosaic. Those ancient migrations created this incredibly complex tapestry of cultures. Today, the country officially recognizes 54 different ethnic groups, which just goes to show you that its story has been one of fusion and diversity right from the very start. Now, what's really fascinating is that long before the centuries of foreign domination we're going to talk about, a powerful, distinct local culture was already thriving. It was a culture defined by incredible craftsmanship and this deep, deep connection to the land. So on the left here, just look at this. It's a masterpiece from the Dung Sung culture, a bronze drum. These people were master metalworkers and amazing rice farmers who formed some of the very first organized chiefdoms. But, and there's always a but in this story, look to the right. You see the constant reality, the enormous shadow of the powerful Han Dynasty in China. This tension, this pull between a fierce, independent local identity and the pressure from a massive northern neighbor, that really sets the stage for the next 1,000 years of Vietnam's history. And then, in 1111 BCE, that shadow completely fell over Vietnam. This kicks off a period of Chinese rule that would last for a millennium. But this wasn't just a story of oppression. No, this was the fire, the crucible, where Vietnamese resilience was truly forged. Let's just let that number sink in for a second. 1,000 years. Can you just imagine the sheer endurance it takes to hold on to your cultural identity through 10 centuries of foreign political control? It's an almost unimaginable length of time. What's so amazing about this period is this fascinating duality. On the one hand, you had constant, often violent resistance, uprising after uprising. But on the other hand, the Vietnamese were incredibly pragmatic. They saw useful ideas like Confucian bureaucracy for running a government, and they adopted them. They blended philosophies like Taoism with Buddhism, which was actually arriving from India by sea, creating this totally unique cultural synthesis. They resisted the rule, but they absorbed the culture. And nothing, I mean nothing, captures that spirit of resistance better than the Trung sisters. In 40 AD, after a Han governor executed one of their husbands, these two sisters, Trung Trắc and Trung Ni, led a massive rebellion that actually kicked the governor out. They ruled as queens. Eventually, the Chinese returned with a huge army, and the sisters chose to commit suicide rather than be captured, cementing their legacy forever as these powerful symbols of Vietnamese defiance. Then, after 1,000 years, the seemingly impossible finally happened. In the 10th century, the Vietnamese people at long last threw off the shackles of Chinese rule and began a whole new era of self-determination, building their own powerful dynasties.
The turning point was this legendary battle at the Baekdung River. A general named Ngo Qian used this brilliant tactic. He planted iron-tipped stakes into the riverbed, hidden at high tide. As the invading fleet came in, he lured them past the stakes, waited for the tide to go out, and their own ships were impaled. It was a decisive, legendary victory that marked the birth of an independent Vietnamese state.
And with independence comes a new name and a whole new level of confidence. By the 11th century, the kingdom was calling itself Dai Viet, or Great Viet. This wasn't just a simple name change. It was a powerful declaration. Vietnam was no longer some rebellious province of China. It was a proud, independent kingdom ready to stand on its own. You can really see this newfound confidence in a big strategic move they made. Emperor Li Kongwon moved the capital to what is now Hanoi, and he named it Thăng Long, the Ascending Dragon. This was a huge signal. It meant they were shifting from a defensive, mountain-based mindset to focusing on building a prosperous economy right in the heart of the fertile Red River Delta.
And they didn't just rule. They built a nation, piece by piece. The Vietnamese dynasties founded universities, created a stable government, engineered massive dike systems to control the rivers and feed their people, and they even developed their very own writing system, Chu Nom, to capture the unique sounds of their language. Every single one of these acts was another declaration of cultural and political independence.
But that golden era of independence would eventually face its ultimate test. This time, the threat wasn't just a regional neighbor, it was the full force of Western colonialism and global superpowers, and it ushered in a new, absolutely brutal chapter of conflict. I mean, just look at this timeline. It is staggering. It shows an almost unbroken century of conflict. First, colonization by France, then a brutal occupation by Japan during World War II. When that war ended, it didn't bring peace. Instead, it kicked off two of the 20th century's most devastating conflicts, a 9-year war for independence against the French, immediately followed by the Vietnam War, a civil war that became a global proxy for the Cold War. So, after finally achieving this incredibly hard-won, painful unification in 1976, Vietnam faced a completely new challenge. How do you rebuild a nation that's been shattered by decades of war and is deep in an economic crisis? And the answer, once again, was adaptation. In 1986, the government launched a policy called Doi Moi, or renovation. It was a radical shift, opening Vietnam up to the world and embracing market economics. This incredible pragmatism triggered an economic miracle, transforming Vietnam from one of the world's poorest countries into the dynamic Southeast Asian economy it is today. Which brings us right here to our final question. The story of Vietnam is a story of a people who have mastered the art of survival. They absorb what's useful from outsiders while fiercely protecting their core identity. They've endured 1,000 years of domination and a century of war. So, what comes next? For a nation that has been forged in fire for so long, what will its next chapter be?